Good day, and thank you for being here. My name is Professor Jason Stevens, and I'm at the University of Auckland in New Zealand, and delighted to be here to talk about cultivating moral character, the Chinese educational vision for a global challenge. I'm particularly grateful to Fei Jiang, Professor Fei Jiang, for inviting me. And I believe this is an event that's taking part and sponsored by the Center for Ideological and Political Education at Northeast Normal University. And grateful for them. I was there in June this year, and they were a wonderful host and delighted to be invited to talk on this topic. And so thank you, and thanks to all of you for your attendance. It truly is an honor to be here and have the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. So um, uh, when I was there in June, I received a copy of this book, Understanding Xi Jinping's Educational Philosophy. And I've developed the talk today around particularly chapter 2 on cultivating a new generation of talent with strong moral character. And so I can't cover all of the chapter, but I want to say a few things about the fundamental task of schools and the fundamental objective of education. And then wrap up by kind of making connections to some of the work I've been involved in over the years around cultivating moral and civic virtues, and then close on that. So why don't we go ahead and get started and with the fundamental task of schools. So early on in that chapter, there's a quote from President Xi Jinping that says, education is a process of cultivating virtue and competence. People without virtue cannot establish themselves. Cultivating morals should therefore be taken as the central task of education. This is the dialectics of education. So I must say I agree wholeheartedly with this. This has been, my belief, that if not education, where else will we really have common understanding and a common model and a common set of values that we should move forward with them. So I think education is central here to cultivating. Morals and moral functioning. Um, in particular, uh, Xi Jinping talks about core socialist values, which I also see, of course, as core moral values. And particularly, there's the idea of prosperity and democracy, civility and harmony that are meant for the country, freedom, equality, and justice and rule of law for society, and then patriotism, dedication, integrity and friendliness are meant for the citizens. And it really is the combination of these things that we're striving for when we talk about an educational vision oriented around cultivating moral character. I'm going to highlight integrity there because that is one that I particularly care about, and one I think that is, really a concern in the Chinese educational vision. And oftentimes when people talk about integrity, uh, they loosely mean it to, refer to somebody being honest or having strong moral principles. But I think it's pretty clear in reading this chapter that, that President Xi Jinping and the educational vision he's laying forth is really more than just being honest. It really is living with integrity. And that is to say, where living in a way such that, what you believe, what you say, and how you act are all consonant, right? All one with one another. So I think that that is really central, and I see that here in this quote, that a person without virtue will not go far. Without moral integrity, no one will be able to accomplish great things, even if they have profound knowledge. So I think that's clear that President Xi Jinping really believes that integrity is central here to living a meaningful, if not powerful, existence and accomplishing great things. So with that as sort of background, we can think about, what is the fundamental objective of education? And here, I really love this metaphor or analogy of having to fasten the first button correctly, right? And again, an extended quote here from President Xi, but what he's talking about is that that this education needs to start early, right? And that and uses this example of, when we button up our coat, we, may inadvertently put the first button in the wrong buttonhole. And then that will result in other buttons being put in wrong holes. And I think that's a really powerful way. And it reminds me a lot of Horace Mann, a 20th century educational philosopher in the West, who said something to the effect of where anything is growing, one former is worth 1,000 reformers, right? We want to get that first buttonhole right, because if we don't, there's going to be a whole lot more to undo, right? As we progress up. So I think that's a nice metaphor to start with. Um, and I think this idea of cultivating this new generation um, is critical because of, um, you know, as he says here in this top quote in particular, right, is that when the virtuous are few, the order is unstable, right? And I think, quite frankly, we can see that right now in the United States in a bit of an unraveling there, where I think there's a leadership in place that lacks some of those virtues, and it's creating a very unstable situation, I think, for those in the country and those beyond. And what you really need is a situation where the virtuous are numerous in the state, and then you will have stability. Um, so, uh, how do we do that? And what's discussed, and particularly in section 3.2 of the chapter, I really like, and I'm calling it imperatives, because these are things that it seems that we should do, right? The things that we are obliged to foster in students if we are to build a successful generation of social builders in this case. And I've highlighted in red a few of them that I want to say a little bit more about. But I acknowledge that all of them are important, and I particularly like that. What what's being said here in this philosophy is that it's not just about beliefs and virtues in this kind of commitment, which I think are core, of course, but it requires knowledge and experience as well, and the emphasis on well-rounded development and even physical aesthetic appreciation is mentioned in there. And of course, a love for your country, also a critical part of um, uh, creating this next generation. So, with respect to firm beliefs, I think what President she talks about here is providing a direction in life. That convictions determine success of a cause. Without ideals and conviction, one suffers from spiritual malnutrition. And again, I love that as a kind of a metaphor, right? A spiritual malnutrition. And I know some of Professor Feijong's work and others around purpose. And I think that's really what he's talking about here is that we need to have purpose, and not just any kind of purpose, but a moral purpose, right? Something that is we have to have a direction and a conviction that is even beyond ourselves, right? And orienting toward bettering society as a whole. Um, uh, and so the second thing I like to focus on is the third imperative of fostering virtue. And again, he says that we need to have high ambitions here as well as pragmatic plans. This is not he is very interested in how do we make this happen, right? And I really like this idea of the law ensuring social stability while virtue nourishes the mind, right? And in that virtue represents the law in one's inner world, right? Necessary in it being necessary to strengthen our awareness, right? To uphold that law, and so that we can develop these habits. And I'll talk more about awareness in moments. But the idea here, right, is there are multiple components going on, right? That this is not, to do this well, to build a next generation of social builders, to foster moral and civic responsibility is not a singular endeavor, right? There's many things that we need to attend to and cultivate. Uh, and one of them here that I really like is again that this is that we can have firm beliefs and we can have virtues, but without motivation, right? Without that drive and direction, the ambition here, those beliefs and virtues will lay dormant, right? They'll be at rest in us. So we need to have this spirit, right? As I say, I think it's really motivation, movere from the Latin to move, right? So these ambitions and to spur us to great achievement. As he says here, those that made great achievements in ancient times had not only exceptional talent, but a strong will. If the will is not established, then nothing can be accomplished in the world. And that do not set easy goals and never dodge difficulties, right? You got to take on the challenge and work hard. And again, he talks about that even in his own childhood in Shinji province, I believe, and working really hard labor for many years and the value of that. Um, and that really that a lot of this younger generation doesn't experience that, but that's another argument. And so it arguably makes our, this is challenging work, is what he's saying, and it needs to be. Um, Okay, so with that, I want to pivot and close up and note that I mentioned I've done some work at the university level initially as a student working with Ann Colby and Tom Ehrlich on this Educating Citizens project. And just like we were talking about here with the imperatives, there's knowledge and understanding, there's motivation, there's skills and capacity, there's a set of core values there. All of that, that's the holistic approach that is needed. And we looked at this in the context of studying 12 universities. And each one, had something different to say about what they valued and how they executed it. But the point is that all of them, involved in some way some integration of stuff that was going on inside of the curriculum, stuff going on outside of the curriculum, outside of the classroom with the extracurricular programs, and then more broadly in the culture. And that's what it takes. Right. Again, as I said earlier, that this is an ambitious goal and a necessary one, but it's not an easy one and one that takes a multifaceted approach. I've also talked about this at the high school level. Again, I used a more problem-based approach here, focusing on academic misconduct, but again, multi-level. Universal education that was school-wide, more specific interventions or efforts to prevent cheating, and then, when needed, individual remediation. And again, that's also talked about in chapter 2 there, where people make mistakes and there needs to be opportunity for correction, right? We will fall short at times, and so will our students, and we need to learn from those mistakes. And in that way, I also created a more seminar approach that happens inside of classrooms. And there's that awareness I mentioned earlier, and that President Xi Jinping talks about too, well, along with the judgment, along with that spirit, the commitment, right, and the skills to act. So all of these components are important in what we might call moral or ethical functioning, right? We need to see the problem. We need to make principled judgments. We need to see that we're responsible, right? And to act. Again, this is focusing on academic integrity, but this could be any other sort of broader sort of problem or challenge or that we want to focus on. The model was developed to be sort of all-encompassing. And it's set around again these four sort of Socratic style dialogues, and you can read more about it in that article. But with that, I need to close. So I want to end with a couple of quotes that I thought were really nice, particularly the first one of virtue is the root, right? It's the foundation of both individual and society, the ultimate force of progress for a country, a nation, and society, right? And we need to know great virtues, maintain public virtues, and practice personal virtues. So on that, I will leave you and thank you again for your attention. If you have any comments or suggestions, questions, please feel free to contact me. And I wish you a good conference. Thanks.